The 30th of January, 1933. Adolf Hitler is appointed Chancellor of Germany, bringing an end to German democracy. Guided by racist and authoritarian ideas, the Nazis abolish basic freedoms and seek to create a community which would unite all social classes and regions of Germany behind one Führer. The Third Reich quickly becomes a police state, where individuals are subject to arbitrary arrest and imprisonment. The Nazis effectively use propaganda to win the support of millions of Germans to facilitate persecution, war, and ultimately genocide. There is, however, some German opposition to the Nazi state, but critics of the Nazi regime will often risk their lives for their defiance of the Führer. One of them is a man who joins the Nazi SS to gain an insight into the German death machinery and shout it out to the whole world. His name is Kurt Gerstein. Kurt Gerstein, the sixth of 7 children of a Prussian middle-class family, was born on the 11th of August 1905 in Münster, then part of the German Empire. Kurt's mother died when he was young, and his father Ludwig was a harsh authoritarian figure and ardent nationalist who instilled an unwavering patriotism in his children. Ludwig, a former Prussian officer, proudly proclaimed that in his family's genealogical tree there was only Aryan blood, and exhorted generations to preserve the purity of the German race. Although an exceptionally bright child, Kurt was a less than ideal student. He skipped classes, ignored his schoolwork, and was even known as a prankster. Despite his flawed scholastic record, he went on to study mining engineering at the universities of Marburg, Aachen, and Berlin, earning his degree in 1931. While studying at Marburg, Gerstein mirrored his father's chauvinistic attitudes and, at his father's request, joined the Corps Teutonia Marburg, one of Germany's most ultra-nationalistic fraternities. Although not exceptionally pious as a boy, Gerstein began to read the Bible while studying at the university. His efforts were likely in response to the drinking and carousing he observed among his fellow fraternity members. At Marburg, he became active in Christian student and youth movements, supporting the Christian education of young men. Adolf Hitler and his Nazi party came into power in January 1933. Initially, Gerstein felt it was his patriotic duty to support the Nazis, and his strong nationalist sentiments drove him to join the Nazi party in May 1933. In the following year, Kurt gravitated towards the Confessing Church. This movement opposed the effort to unify the German Protestant churches into a single pro-Nazi establishment. Despite his father's disapproval, Gerstein became dedicated to the movement. It was through his involvement with the church that he first came into conflict with the Nazi regime. As the preachings of the Confessing Church failed to square with Nazi doctrine, the German state gradually impinged upon the church and its organizations. Gerstein felt that he had to choose between defending his church and supporting his nation, and he chose his church. At the end of January 1935, Gerstein attended a performance of the play Vatican. The play's pro-Nazi and anti-Christian message goaded him into action. Gerstein stood up during the performance, declaiming its neo-pagan rhetoric, and was promptly beaten by SA members in the audience. The following year, Gerstein was arrested for conducting an anti-Nazi pamphlet campaign in favor of preserving church autonomy. He was held for 5 weeks in protective custody and expelled from the Nazi party. Unable to find work after his expulsion, Gerstein returned to school to study medicine. On the 31st of August 1937, he married Elfriede Bench, a pastor's daughter, and from 1936 till 1938, they lived in Tübingen. The marriage produced a daughter named Adelheid. In July 1938, Gerstein was arrested a second time on suspicion of anti-Nazi activities, but he was released after 6 weeks. On the 10th of June 1939, Gerstein was readmitted to the Nazi Party with provincial membership. In this effort, he had had the help of his father and several influential Nazi Party and SS officials. Membership allowed Gerstein to continue his career in mining engineering in the state sector, which almost always required Nazi Party affiliation. The Second World War began on the 1st of September 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. In mid-February 1941, Gerstein discovered that his sister-in-law, Berta Eberling, had died at a psychiatric hospital in Hadamar, Germany. Hadamar was one of 6 clandestine killing centers operating in the Nazi so-called euthanasia program, which was the systematic murder of institutionalized patients with disabilities in Germany. Gerstein had heard rumors that the German government had embarked on the systematic murder of persons with disabilities who were living in institutions, and he began to suspect correctly that his sister-in-law had been murdered. Erbling's death had added to a growing list of factors contributing to Gerstein's curiosity and concern about what was happening behind the scenes in Nazi Germany. He decided the best way to find out was to join the SS, a move that would clear him of any suspicion, given his past opposition to Nazi rule. From 1939, the SS assumed responsibility for solving the so-called Jewish question. And after 1941, its leadership planned, coordinated, and directed the so-called final solution of the Jewish question. This solution was the annihilation of the European Jews, which we now refer to as the Holocaust. Kurt Gerstein trained for 2 months in a medical corps, and on the 1st of June 1941, he was assigned to the Hygiene Institute of the Waffen-SS in Berlin, where Gerstein distinguished himself through his comprehensive understanding of engineering and sanitation. The Waffen-SS was the military branch of the SS. Gerstein's most important contribution was in the development of techniques for vermin control and maintaining quality drinking water for combat troops. On the 1st of November 1941, he was appointed as a specialist SS second lieutenant in the Waffen-SS, and on the 20th of April 1943, he was promoted to SS First Lieutenant in the Waffen-SS. Because of his position in the Hygiene Institute and his expert knowledge of decontamination techniques, Gerstein came to learn of the implementation of the final solution. He was responsible for the delivery of large quantities of Zyklon B gas to Auschwitz and other camps. Zyklon B was the poison gas used by the Nazis for mass extermination. He was also invited to inspect the Operation Reinhardt killing centers at Bełżec and Treblinka. Operation Reinhardt was the code name for the German plan to murder the approximately 2 million Jews living in German-occupied Poland. At Bełżec and Treblinka, the SS staff used carbon monoxide gas produced by large diesel engines to murder prisoners in the gas chambers. In August 1942, Gerstein observed a mass killing of Jews at Bełżec. He later described this murder as follows. Then the procession starts moving. In front, a very lovely young girl, so all of them go along the alley, all naked, men, women, children, without artificial limbs. I myself stand together with Hauptmann Christian Wirth on top of the ramp between the gas chambers. Mothers with babies at their breasts. They come onward, hesitate, enter the death chambers. At the corner, a strong SS man stands, who with a voice like a pastor says to the poor people, "There is not the least chance that something will happen to you. You must only take a deep breath in the chamber. That widens the lungs. This inhalation is necessary because of the illnesses and epidemics." On the question of what would happen to them, he answered, "Yes, of course, the men have to work, building houses and roads, but the women don't need to work. Only if they wish they can help in housekeeping or in the kitchen." For some of these poor people, this gave a little glimmer of hope, enough to go the few steps into the chambers without resistance. The majority are aware. The smell tells them of their fate, so they climb the small staircase, and then they see everything. Mothers with little children at their breast, little naked children, adults, men, women, all naked. They hesitate, but they enter the death chambers, pushed forward by those behind them, or driven by the leather whips of the SS. The majority without saying a word. A Jewess of about 40 years of age, with flaming eyes, calls down in vengeance on the head of the murderers for the blood which she has shed here. She gets 5 or 6 lashes with a riding crop into her face from Hauptmann Wirth personally, then she also disappears into the chamber. Many people pray. I pray with them. I press myself into a corner and shout loudly to my and their God. How gladly I would have entered the chamber together with them. How gladly I would have died the same death as them. Then they would have found a uniformed SS man in their chambers. The case would have been understood and treated as an accident. One man quietly missing. Still, I am not allowed to do this. First I must tell what I am experiencing here. And he did. Gerstein recorded what he saw at Bełżec in great detail and described the process by which trainloads of Jews entered the camp, how their possessions were taken and their hair shorn. He also described how the Jews were made to undress and enter the gas chamber, how they were packed so tightly that they could not collapse as they suffocated. He later maintained that this experience made him determined to inform the world of the horrors taking place in the killing centers. On the night between the 22nd and 23rd of August, 1942, Kurt Gerstein met Swedish diplomat Baron Göran von Otter in a train from Warsaw to Berlin. Gerstein was on his way back from Treblinka. The previous day, he had witnessed several hundred Jewish victims being murdered in the gas chambers at Belzec's extermination camp. Gerstein and von Otter happened to be in the same compartment of the train. This meeting, which lasted several hours, gave Gerstein the opportunity to tell the diplomat what he had seen and urge him to spread the information internationally. Gerstein also made efforts to circulate his story to Swiss diplomat Paul Hochstrasser, to Vatican officials, and to the representatives of the Dutch government in exile. He also made efforts to inform members of the confessing church and of the political resistance within Germany. Gerstein also urged members of the Dutch underground to broadcast his information by radio to Great Britain. But he was ignored. Nothing happened. All were disinclined to believe his gruesome narrative of mass murder, and it was rejected as atrocity propaganda. As months continued to pass, and still the Allies had done nothing to stop the extermination, Gerstein became increasingly frantic. He behaved in a desperate manner, risking his life every time he spoke of the death camps to persons he scarcely knew. Sadly, however, Gerstein's revelations were never conveyed to the Allied governments. Later during the war, a despairing Gerstein risked his life destroying shipments of Zyklon B gas to be used for the extermination of Jewish people. The gas was buried on the pretext that it had been spoiled in transit. By April 1945, the destruction of the Third Reich was imminent, and Gerstein surrendered himself to French authorities in southwestern Germany. In his statement, he declared that he had given himself up so that the Allies might use his knowledge to punish those responsible for murder. Ironically, however, Gerstein became not a witness, but a suspect. At the end of May 1945, he was moved from a Hotel Morin, where he had been staying under house arrest, to the jail in Constance and later to Cherche Midi prison in Paris. While in custody in the Hotel Morin, Gerstein had written what is now known as the Gerstein Report. In this report, Gerstein recounted all that he had seen during his service with the SS. It was here that he described his experience at Bełżec and his conversations with von Otter and other foreign officials. On the 25th of July, 1945, Gerstein was found hanged in his cell. It is likely that his anguish in being cast as a war criminal, as well as his despair at failing to halt the final solution, drove him to suicide. However, rumors persist that fellow SS members may have murdered him for betraying information about the Holocaust. Gerstein's 1945 report has been used as evidence in a number of high-profile cases. It was used at the Nuremberg Trials against major Nazi war criminals such as Hermann Göring and Hans Frank. On the 17th of August, 1950, a denazification tribunal in Tübingen found Gerstein to have been a Nazi offender for his assistance in the production and delivery of Zyklon B, and his widow was denied a pension. However, in January 1965, almost 15 years later, with the help of Baron von Otter and other well-placed supporters, Gerstein's wife obtained a posthumous pardon for him from the Federal Republic of Germany. There were many tears shed for Kurt Gerstein.
Thanks for watching the World History Channel. Be sure to like and subscribe, and click the bell notification icon so you don't miss our next episodes. We thank you, and we'll see you next time on the channel.